Marcus Reeves had been standing in that parking lot for exactly 90 seconds when the woman in the red floral blouse decided he was a threat. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't stepped toward her car. He'd pulled into an open spot, put his sedan in park, and reached for the door handle when her horn blared behind him, sharp and insistent, the kind of sound meant to announce ownership over something that belonged to no one. By the time the police cruisers left that lot, 3 careers would be finished, and a department would be facing questions it had no good answers for. But standing there in the early afternoon sun, Marcus didn't know any of that yet. All he knew was that a stranger was already out of her car, already walking toward him with her finger raised, already convinced of something that hadn't happened.
That was my spot!
Marcus glanced at his mirror, then back at her.
Didn't see your signal.
Excuse me?
If you were waiting for it, you didn't signal. I didn't see you.
He kept his voice even, unbothered, the same tone he might use correcting a junior officer's paperwork. There's another one 2 rows down. She blinked, as if the response itself was an offense. Diane Calloway wasn't used to being answered. She was used to being agreed with, or at minimum, apologized to. A tall man in a grey t-shirt standing his ground in a pharmacy parking lot wasn't part of the script she'd written for her afternoon. You people always do this, she said. Just take whatever you want. Marcus said nothing. He'd heard some version of that sentence more times in his life than he could count, and he'd learned decades ago that silence did more damage to people like her than argument ever could. He locked his car and started walking toward the pharmacy entrance. That should have been the end of it. Instead, Diane's husband came around the corner of the building with a bag from the hardware store, saw his wife's face, and didn't ask a single question before deciding whose side he was on. Everything okay, babe? Roger Calloway said, already glaring at Marcus like the answer was obvious. He practically ran me off, Diane said, and something in her voice had changed, tightened, taken on the particular pitch of a woman performing for an audience that hadn't gathered yet. Wouldn't even apologize. There's nothing to apologize for, Marcus said. He didn't stop walking. Hey, Roger's voice cracked louder across the lot, sharp enough that a woman loading groceries into her trunk 2 spaces away looked up. My wife's talking to you. Marcus stopped, turned, kept his hands loose at his sides, his shoulders relaxed, the posture of a man who had spent 3 decades learning that the worst thing he could do in a volatile room was look like a threat in it. She said what she needed to say. I answered her. He held Roger's stare for a beat, calm, unblinking. We're done here. But they weren't done. Not by a long shot. Diane's arms were crossed now, her chin lifted, and something ugly was working its way across her face, the particular satisfaction of a woman who had found an audience and intended to use it. A man near the cart return had paused, phone half raised out of habit before he'd even decided to record anything. An employee in a red vest stood near the automatic doors, watching, unsure whether this was actually his problem yet. You don't get to just walk away from this, Diane said, her voice climbing. This is exactly the problem. Nobody wants to take accountability anymore. Marcus exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that cost him more discipline than it looked like it did. Ma'am, I parked in an open space. That's the entire situation. That's not the entire situation. She snapped, stepping closer, close enough that Marcus could see her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from something closer to excitement. The entire situation is you thinking you can talk to me like that, like you own this place. He didn't own the place. He barely owned his own afternoon, a rare handful of days carved out to help his mother pack boxes before her move, days he deliberately kept quiet, deliberately ordinary, no driver, no aide, no uniform. Just a son running an errand for his mother's blood pressure medication, wearing the same grey shirt he'd worn to move furniture that morning. None of that mattered to Diane Calloway. She had already decided who he was the moment she saw him, and nothing he said in that parking lot was going to change her mind. Only make it worse. I don't feel safe, she said suddenly, her voice shifting, dropping into something rehearsed, something she'd clearly used before and found effective. Roger, I don't feel safe. Roger's jaw tightened. You don't gotta feel safe. I'm right here. No, she said, louder now, loud enough that heads were turning across the lot, loud enough that the store employee had started moving toward them. "I want someone here. I want this documented." Marcus felt something cold settle low in his chest. Not fear. He hadn't felt fear in a parking lot in a very long time, but recognition. He knew exactly where this was headed before Diane's hand ever reached into her purse. She pulled out her phone, thumb already moving, and by the time Marcus registered what she was doing, she'd already pressed the call button, already lifted the phone to her ear. Her eyes locked on him the entire time, like she was daring him to stop her. "Yes, hi, I need police at the Baton Heights Plaza, off Route 9, she said, her voice steadying now, cool and clipped, the performance complete. "There's a man here who's being aggressive. He won't leave me alone, and..." She paused, looked Marcus up and down once, slowly, deliberately, "and I think he might have something in his waistband." The lie left her mouth as easily as her name would have. Diane hung up. Marcus hadn't moved. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't clenched a fist, hadn't given her a single thing to point to, and it hadn't mattered at all. In the distance, faint but growing, the first siren started. Would you stay silent or start recording? Tell me in the comments. And subscribe, because the officers arriving at that parking lot have no idea who they're about to confront. The siren grew louder, then a second joined it, and before Marcus had time to consider what he'd say, a patrol car swung into the lot with its lights cutting blue and red across the storefront glass. Marcus hadn't moved from where he stood near the pharmacy entrance. He'd learned a long time ago that stillness read as innocence to some people and as arrogance to others, and there was nothing he could do about which one Baton Heights PD would choose before they even got out of the car. Two officers emerged. The younger one, hand already resting near his belt, started toward Marcus first. "Sir, I need you to keep your hands where I can see them." Marcus raised them slowly, palms open. "Understood." That should have settled something. It didn't. Diane was already moving toward the officers, her voice pitched high and urgent, words tumbling faster than the truth could keep up with. "He wouldn't let me leave. He was aggressive. I told the dispatcher he had something on him." "I don't have anything on me," Marcus said, calm, direct, no defensiveness in it. "You're welcome to check." The younger officer hesitated at that, an offer nobody guilty usually made. But his partner, older, heavier through the shoulders, had already made his decision walking in from the car. "Turn around for me." "Based on what?" Marcus asked. Not a challenge. A genuine question, delivered evenly. Based on a call describing a possible weapon. "Turn around." There it was, the moment where a reasonable request should have led to a reasonable next step. Verify the claim. Ask the woman what, specifically, she'd seen. Ask the man, standing calmly, in a grey t-shirt, to explain himself, before assuming the worst version of him. None of that happened. Marcus turned around. The cuffs clicked shut around his wrists, cold and final, and something in the crowd that had gathered near the cart corral went very quiet. A woman near the entrance mouthed something to her son and pulled him closer. The man who'd half raised his phone during the parking dispute lifted it fully now, thumb finding the record button, hands not quite steady. He didn't say anything. He just watched, the way people watch something they suspect they'll regret not documenting. Diane exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for an hour. "Thank you," she said to the officers, like they'd done her a personal favor. Then, louder, for the benefit of everyone now watching from a widening circle, "This is exactly the problem. This is exactly what happens when nobody's willing to say anything." Roger stepped up beside her, chest out, emboldened by the sight of handcuffs doing the work his own posturing hadn't managed. "Yeah, you think you can just do whatever you want. Not here. This is our country." The words landed hard and stupid and public, and Marcus, cuffed, standing in the afternoon sun with a small crowd now filming him, said nothing at all. He decided somewhere around the third sentence that silence would serve him better than explanation. Explanation was for people who thought the truth mattered yet, to whoever was listening. Right now, nobody standing in this lot had earned the truth. The older officer patted him down, nothing, obviously nothing, and pulled his wallet from his back pocket. Standard black leather, worn soft at the corners, no insignia, no branch patch, nothing that announced what it belonged to. Marcus Reeves, the officer, read off the license, flat, procedural. He glanced up. "That your legal name?" "It is." The officer clipped his radio and turned half away, running the name in the plate through dispatch in the low mutter cops use when they don't want a scene listening in. Marcus watched his face during the wait, not out of anxiety, but out of habit. The same instinct that had once told him which junior officers were about to say something they'd regret in a briefing room. This one's face didn't change yet. It would. Just not yet. Diane, meanwhile, had found her rhythm. She was talking to a woman near the cart return now, gesturing at Marcus like he was an exhibit. I was terrified. Genuinely terrified. You don't know what that's like, having someone get in your face like that. He didn't get in your face, the man with the phone said quietly. Not loud. Not brave, exactly. Just true, and said out loud for the first time. Diane's head snapped toward him. Excuse me? I was standing right there. He lowered the phone slightly, like he hadn't meant to be heard, hadn't fully decided yet whether he wanted to be involved in this at all. He went up to him. Not the other way round. That is not what happened, Diane said, and her voice had gone thin at the edges now, the first hairline crack in a performance that had, until 30 seconds ago, been flawless. The officer with the radio wasn't listening to any of that. He was listening to dispatch, and whatever came through his earpiece made him go very still. He glanced back at Marcus, a different look now, something between confusion and the specific unease of a man realizing he might be standing in the middle of a mistake he can't yet name. Say that again, he said into the radio. Quiet, careful. His partner noticed the change first. Everything good? The older officer didn't answer him. He was looking at Marcus now, really looking, the way you look at someone once you suspect you've gotten something badly wrong, but don't yet have proof of exactly how badly. Sir, he said slowly, is there someone I should be calling? A supervisor, family, anyone who can confirm. You can call whoever handles verification, Marcus said, still perfectly level. I'm not going anywhere. The officer's throat moved as he swallowed. He keyed his radio again, and this time his voice had lost its casual procedural flatness entirely. Dispatch, I need a supervisor to this location. Now. Diane heard that too, and something in her expression flickered. Not doubt yet, not quite, but the first uneasy sense that the ground under her certainty had shifted without her permission. She looked at Roger. Roger looked at the officer, then at Marcus, then back at his wife with the beginning of a question neither of them wanted to ask out loud. What's going on? Diane said. What did dispatch say? Nobody answered her. In the distance, past the pharmacy sign and the row of parked cars, a second set of lights was already turning into the lot. Not another patrol car, but something moving with a different kind of urgency. Whatever dispatch had just told them, someone important was on the way. The car that pulled in wasn't marked the same way. A sergeant's insignia caught light at the collar as the door opened, and the man inside crossed the lot in long strides, eyes scanning the scene, the cuffs, the crowd, the two officers standing a half step too close together. Then his eyes found Marcus, and he stopped 3 feet short of where he needed to be. Sir, the sergeant said. His voice had changed entirely. General Reeves. I am so sorry, sir. For a full second, nobody moved. The younger officer's hand went to the cuffs before his brain caught up, and the metal came off Marcus's wrists faster than it had gone on. Diane's mouth opened. Nothing came out. General, she repeated, like the word itself might be a trick. Her eyes went to Roger, then back to Marcus, the grey t-shirt, the plain sedan, the ordinary black wallet. 4-star, the sergeant said quietly to his officers, and both of them went pale. Marcus rolled his wrists once, unhurried. He didn't look triumphant. If anything, he looked tired. Sergeant, he said, I appreciate you coming out. Sir, the sergeant's composure cracked slightly. There is no version of this that should have happened. I need you to know that. Around them, the crowd's stillness had shifted into something electric. The man with the phone hadn't lowered it once. A woman near the cart return had her hand pressed flat against her chest. Somewhere behind Marcus, a teenager whispered, did he just say general to no one in particular? And the word rippled outward through the gathered onlookers. Diane found her voice before anyone expected her to. Well, how were we supposed to know that? He didn't say anything. He didn't tell anyone who he was. I shouldn't have to, Marcus said. It wasn't sharp. It didn't need to be. I was standing in a parking lot, not committing a crime. You were aggressive, Diane said. She said it again, louder. You were aggressive, and I had every right to be concerned. The sergeant's jaw tightened. Ma'am, I need you to stop talking. No. I have a right to explain what happened. I called because I felt unsafe. That's not a crime either. You told dispatch he had a weapon, the sergeant said. There was no weapon. I said I thought you said something in his waistband, the man with the phone said. I heard you say it. It's on my phone. Diane turned on him. This has nothing to do with you. It kind of does, he said, and didn't look away. Roger stepped in front of his wife, chest still puffed. You need to back off. This is insane. He's a stranger in a parking lot. She had every right to be scared. Ma'am, the sergeant said, turning back to Diane, you reported a man with a weapon. There was no weapon. That's something we're going to have to investigate. He held her stare a beat longer than the sentence required. This is ridiculous, Roger said, louder now. You people are going to take his word over ours because of some title? This is our... He caught himself. Almost. The sentence hung there, half finished, and everyone in that lot understood exactly which two words he'd swallowed because they'd already heard him say them once, 20 minutes and a lifetime ago. Diane grabbed his arm. Roger. No, he said, shaking her off. He rounded on Marcus directly now, close enough that the sergeant's hand came up between them. You think a uniform makes you better than us? You think stars on a collar mean you get to just... I'm not wearing a uniform? Marcus said quietly. I haven't said a single thing about who I am since this started. You did that. Both of you did that, to yourselves, in front of everyone here. Roger's mouth worked, and found nothing. For the first time since the horn had blared behind Marcus's car, the parking lot felt genuinely silent, just Roger standing there, with his fists still half clenched, and nowhere left to point them. The sergeant exhaled. He turned to his two officers. Separate them, now, and somebody find out who else has this on video, because I guarantee you it's more than just him. He nodded toward the man with the phone, then looked back at Marcus, his voice dropping. General, whatever you need from us, whatever this requires, my captain is already on his way. I called him the second dispatch, confirmed your name. Marcus glanced past the sergeant's shoulder, out toward the road, where a third set of lights was just beginning to swing into view. Good, he said, because this isn't just about what happened to me anymore. Diane heard that. So did Roger. Neither of them understood yet exactly what it meant. Chief Alvarez arrived 20 minutes later, out of uniform, having clearly left his own house in a hurry. He found Marcus near the pharmacy entrance, away from the cameras, and didn't waste time on pleasantries. General, I've already pulled the 911 audio. I've read the initial incident report. I know how this looks, and I know how it's about to look on the news tonight. He exhaled. So I'm asking you directly, what do you want from this department? Marcus had been turning the question over since the cuffs came off, and the answer had settled into something clear. Don't punish them because I'm a general, he said. Investigate them because they would have done exactly the same thing to someone who wasn't. Alvarez went quiet for a moment, the weight of that landing somewhere he hadn't expected. That's not usually the request I get in situations like this. It's the only one that matters, Marcus said. Pull every complaint your department has on file for calls that started the way this one did. A description, an assumption, cuffs before questions. If today taught your officers anything, it should be how fast that pattern moves. I just happen to be someone it couldn't hide behind. Alvarez nodded slowly, and something in his posture shifted, not defensive anymore, but genuinely listening. I'll open a formal review. Not just tonight's incident, the whole pattern. I'll get someone outside the department involved, so it isn't us grading our own work. That's the only version of this worth doing. Behind them, the reporter had already gotten what footage she needed and moved on toward the officer standing with Diane, who was still giving her statement in a voice that had lost every trace of its earlier certainty. She wasn't performing anymore. There was no one left to perform for. You reported an armed threat that didn't exist, the officer said, reading from his notes. That's a filed false report. It'll go to the DA's office. I made a mistake, Diane said. Quiet now. I panicked. You had 30 seconds between the horn and the call, the officer said. That's not panic. That's a decision. She didn't answer that. Roger stood a few feet away, arms still crossed, watching his wife account for an afternoon that had started over a parking spot and was ending with a legal filing. Neither of them looked at the crowd anymore. The crowd had already stopped looking back with any interest in their side of it. Dale Winters lingered near the edge of the lot longer than he needed to, phone finally pocketed, watching Marcus and the chief finish their conversation. When Marcus caught his eye, Dale gave a small nod, not for the video, not for the reveal, just an acknowledgement between two people who'd stood in the same parking lot and made very different choices about what to do with what they saw. Appreciate you not staying quiet, Marcus said, crossing over to him. Almost did, Dale admitted. Figured it wasn't my business. It became your business the second you decided it was. Marcus extended a hand. That matters more than people usually tell you it does. The story ran on the local news that night. By morning, it had traveled far beyond Baton Heights. The clip that spread wasn't the one of Marcus in cuffs. It was 30 seconds of him telling the reporter, calmly, that he didn't want the officers fired. He wanted the process fixed. Because the process was what had almost cost an innocent man his afternoon and could still cost someone else far more. It didn't sound like a general. It sounded like a man who understood exactly what he'd almost lost and exactly what other people lost every day without 4 stars to bring the cameras running. Diane Calloway was charged with filing a false police report within the week. When the department's investigator asked her, plainly, why she'd told the dispatcher he had a weapon, what exactly she'd seen, she opened her mouth to answer and found there wasn't one. Not a real one. Just a feeling she'd had and decided was fact, because it was easier than doubting herself in front of a crowd. She sat with that question longer than she sat with any of the ones that came after it. Her real estate license came under review not long after. Clients don't stay easily once their agent's name is attached to a viral clip, for the wrong reasons. Roger's employer never publicly explained why his name stopped appearing on new assignments. They didn't have to. The footage had already done that. Baton Heights PD's internal review, once it actually started digging, found what Marcus had suspected it would. A pattern of calls where a vague description had escalated straight to restraint, with no verification step in between. Most of them involving men who looked like him. The department didn't announce sweeping reform with a press conference. It announced something smaller and more durable, a new verification protocol before any physical restraint on an unconfirmed threat, and a review board that didn't answer to the chief who'd have to defend its findings. Marcus never asked for updates. Alvarez sent them anyway, every few weeks, unprompted, the kind of accountability that doesn't need to be requested once someone finally decides it matters. His mother's house was 3 streets over, and when Marcus pulled into her driveway that evening, boxes still half packed in the front hall, she was waiting on the porch with the particular look of a woman who'd already seen the news. You didn't call me, she said. Didn't want you to worry. I saw the whole thing on my phone before you even got here. She studied him for a long moment, then stepped down to meet him, her hand finding his arm the way it had when he was small enough to need steadying. You all right? I'm all right. He meant it. It wasn't really about me. She didn't ask him to explain that. She'd raised him, after all. She already knew. Inside, the boxes waited, ordinary and unremarkable, exactly as they'd been that morning before any of it started. Marcus picked one up, and together they got back to the quiet, unglamorous work of moving forward. He had walked into that parking lot as a man doing something small for his mother. He left it knowing something he'd spent a lifetime learning and still hated having to relearn. Sometimes the system doesn't remember its rules until the person it has wronged has enough power to make it remember. And for everyone who doesn't have 4 stars, the work of changing that system is still waiting. Have you ever watched someone get judged before anyone bothered to ask a single question? What would you have done if you were standing in that parking lot? If this story moved you, hit like, subscribe for more stories about justice, dignity, and truth, and share it with someone who still believes the truth matters, even when it takes time to arise. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations depicted are fictional and do not represent any actual people, events, or true stories. This content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration.